Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Artcasters number 233. Today, as most days, we're going to talk about comics and teaching comics and stuff like that. But first of all, we'll kind of do our regular round the table thing. You're on my channel, so hopefully you know who I am. I'm Scott with Circworks Art Labs. I don't really have anything to promote other than, if you want to go and get some digital products. I do have all my digital products are on sale for 40% off right now.
Nice.
So there's that. I think that's about all really I have to promote. I'm just about tomorrow is my last episode of Making Comics 101, the last quick tip.
Dude.
So next week it's going to be something all new. So yeah.
That is a mountain, man. That's impressive.
Thank you. we actually had sort of a fan. We'll get into that. We got a fan of the Making Comics 101 with us here on the show today, but we'll get into that. But next week I'm going to sort of do a wrap up and just talk about my experience through the whole thing and what I got and everything. So, all right. So yeah, and as usual, we've got my co-host Joshua Kimball. Hey Josh, how's it going?
All right. So I don't have a ton to promote.
You're doing a lot, but you can't.
I'm doing a lot. So I'm 6 songs into recording a 10-song album. That's like my quarantine excuse for like not being able to jam with my band. I'm like, I'm gonna make a solo album. That's weird.
You better go, brother.
Pop songs instead of like. Anyhow, so that's occurring, but not much to show yet. But there's like 6 in the can, and then I'm hoping to track 4 within like a couple weeks.
Nice.
And then on top of that, on the comic front, just a lot of like writing and editing, and especially with the proposals with my literary agent. So it's like there's about 4 different proposals now that are kind of in the works, and then the main proposal for quarterlystories.com. And that I have to have the whole second book, the whole manuscript finished by the end of the week. And so it's a good deadline. It's kind of a flexible deadline because it's from my literary agent, not from a publisher, but still I'm going to try to hit it. So, but it's all boring stuff to show on Instagram or stuff like that. For a while, I was just doing updates where I just show like a coffee mug or something in front of the script. So I was like obscuring it. But it's just gotten into that like fine-tuned editing. So it's like I don't think I want to show a bunch of screenshots of like I changed this letter. I added a paragraph here, But anyhow, that's a long-winded way of saying if you want to see my previous work, go to joshuakimball.com. That's where the album will probably launch too, if you're a fan of music. But we'll get into that when that comes, which should be in a couple of weeks, maybe a month. All right, so that's my stuff.
All right. And so our guest today is Rodney Bennett. Now, Rodney reached out to me to kind of thank me for doing the Making Comics 101 series. And so, and he kind of told me what he was doing and sent me a link. So I checked out his stuff. I'm like, man, this is really good.
Yeah.
And so this is what's cool because, and this is what one of the things I was hoping to do when I did that series was not only for, I didn't want it just to be for people that weren't familiar with comics or hadn't created comics, but I wanted it to be for those people, but I also wanted for people that are already skilled at doing comics and already creating comics. And I was hoping that there would be enough for them too. And it sounded like I may have pulled it off. So, because I looked at your stuff and it was great. So if you're from the series, then that kind of makes me feel pretty good. So, but yeah, so you sent me, and one thing I noticed it looked like you were doing all kinds of stuff, and we'll get into that a little bit because since we don't know each other that well, anytime we have a new guest on the show, before we get into our topic, I just want to, I want to kind of chit chat a little bit and find out what you're doing other than what I already know. But so anyway, so I checked out your website and I saw that you were teaching, and I saw some videos of you talking about your book, which we've got it on the screen, Legend of the Black Star. So definitely go and check Rodney's stuff out. There's also that link is also in the description of this video if you want to check that out. And I'll let you pimp your own stuff too. But for right now, I just I want to lay out some more praise. But anyway, so I saw your videos. I saw your videos, and I'm like, okay, this guy's definitely comfortable on camera and everything, which is good when you're bringing somebody on, because you never know if you haven't met somebody, you could bring them on the show and then be like, oh yeah, I make comics, and so anyway, so you're enthusiastic. So I think this guy's going to be the perfect guest. So anyway, but I noticed that you not only do you teach comics, which we'll get into. You do caricatures, which I've done a little. I haven't done it in a while, but it looked like you also do some sculptures, which I got a comment on one of my videos saying it was one of like my tips for making comic videos or whatever, and they were saying one tip is to create sculptures of your heroes so you can do turnarounds. I said, yeah, that's a great idea. Unfortunately, I'm not a good enough sculptor to pull that off, but it looks like you are. So, but anyway, Rodney, so why don't you talk about your comics, talk about what you do, and then after that we'll kind of get into the topic.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I've got a series of books out called Legend of the Black Star. No Rest for the Weary. That's the story arc that I'm on right now. So basically, the story takes place in the late 1930s. And it's a blend of sci-fi, superhero, and some elements of horror genres in there. And so what's going down is a young lady, a young girl, who's mysteriously disappeared. Okay, and so the masked crime fighter, African-American crime fighter, he's on the case. Okay, he gets involved, and all clues lead to Tweed's mortuary. And upon his arrival, his investigations unearth an evidence of government cover-up, zombie attacks, and all-around weird science. How the thing came about was I've always loved comics, man, since I was a little dude.
Yeah,
loved them. And I was looking for, I guess as I was coming up, I didn't see a whole lot of characters who looked like me, who I could relate to. I mean, I had characters that I liked, but I could count on one hand how many characters look like me, And I mean, contrary to some people's belief, it's important for people to feel like, especially kids, to be able to identify with a superhero character, cartoon character, whatever that looks like them, And so in waiting for other comic creators, like the big companies to create something that would appeal to me, and be looking and you don't see it, and then man, it was like I was thinking about that thing, and I felt like the Lord was telling me, well, look, I gave you the skills. You need to put them skills to work and go ahead and create something that you want to see. And if you pour your heart into it, then 9 times out of 10 times out of 10, what comes from the heart goes to the heart, and people are gonna receive it, because you're putting your passion in all these sort of things in that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I always say write what you know. I mean, that's why, even though my book's about like zombies, obviously I don't know anything about zombies, but it's kids, and it's loosely, the kids in my story are loosely based on me and my friends growing up. Obviously we weren't living in a zombie apocalypse, but similar to what, and you change things around, similar, like I read your bio, you were talking about how you wanted to set it in the 30s, because definitely at that time there were no black superheroes. Yeah. So, and I think that, and for me, anything that I've ever written as far as comic books, it's always a period piece. I don't think I've ever told a story that takes place in current times. It's always like my story takes place in the 80s. The one I started before that, which I never finished, took place in the 70s. My idea for the next one is an alternate reality in the 80s. So, I always, and any idea that, I don't know, for some reason, the modern things, because then you have to bring in the cell phones, and some, depending on your story, that can create, especially if you're doing horror, cell phones are always a big problem. So, but yeah, so I mean, I thought that was cool that you the reasoning for setting it in 30s and everything.
I also just think as an artist, it's like that's a fun era to set it in, because like the cars that you get to draw, like I saw some of your designs, and I think that's cool. It's like a nice sandbox to play in, like that era in time, and sense of like clothes and like cars and buildings and stuff. So that's really awesome. Yeah.
So you're what, 3 issues into your book now, Rodney?
I am. I'm 3 issues in. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you cut out for a second there, but I can hear you now.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm 3 issues in, and I'm currently working on the 4th one to finish up this No Rest for the Weary story.
I love it.
Oh, cool. Definitely, yeah, definitely check it out. I mean, it looks pretty awesome. So, yeah, I'm gonna have to look more into it and everything. Yeah, I was really impressed with what I saw. So,
man, bless you.
Yeah. So you create comics. I mean, you said you've been drawing and stuff probably all your life. Like I assume everyone here right on this call right now. So. Yeah, I mean, I remember it's always that same old thing where it's like I've been drawing for as long since I could pick up a pencil type of thing.
Yeah, man.
So it's always good that you get to do what you love and share that. And that's kind of what I want to talk about today is basically passing on what we've learned. We've all learned how to create comics, and seeing that I just wrapped up this series, or the last episode will go out, because before Josh, I mean, I think you teach comics and art and everything, Rodney. Joshua has taught like college and illustration. What exactly did you teach, Josh?
So I taught visual communication. Okay. I taught Photoshop, intro to Photoshop, intro to illustration. And then I taught graphic illustration, which actually had a comic element to it, because it's one of the best ways to teach people how to do book design, like in book layout, is to have them have to like be challenged by it. And I always liked also assigning like poster projects, trying to have somebody convey a story, a wordless comic that had to have a title treatment and then like a minimum of like 10 panels, so that they had to kind of start thinking about paneling and being inventive, kind of sequencing. There's a lot of like really core design principles, I think, in embedded into comics that I honestly am kind of surprised it's not more often assigned in illustration classes and design classes, because it is a huge, like, to me that's one of, I'm sure for all of us, but it's like, to me that's one of the most appealing things about comics, is that it's this crazy puzzle. And it's one of the hardest like design challenges you'll ever face, because you've got to deal with text, you have to deal with legibility, you have to think about hierarchy of needs, like in the sense of like what's the visual hierarchy on the page, how the action's moving the eye on the page, all of that stuff like condensed into this crazy medium. So I'm always surprised like that like when I was going to art school, I know it's changed a lot. I'm sure it's probably pretty similar to you Scott. Like when you were going to school, did they have a lot of comics courses?
Actually, I did in my I guess I lucked out. There was we did have a comics class, and cool. We had our teacher kind of borrowed some of the curriculum from Art Center. As far as some of the industrial design stuff. So we had industrial design projects and things like that.
That's
so it's a really good program. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist anymore. It was at a community college, and they kind of switched everything over to medical. So that's all that school does now. But yeah, it was kind of good while it lasted. But I was lucky enough to have some comics classes and stuff like that. But
what about you, Rodney? Did they have like a lot of comics courses like in because for me it was like mostly it was treated like, oh, you do Sunday funny kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I've noticed it changing, and I think that's a good thing, because like I said, it's a really good design challenge, just like
it is, man.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was in school, man, we didn't have no comics class. Now I did have in high school I had a cartooning class.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Nice.
It was so that was an elective that I was able to select, and I loved it. I mean, I absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
But it was more or less on creating characters and storytelling and stuff like that. But it wasn't anything to where I was learning sequential art or
Yeah.
page layout, none of that stuff. None of that
Yeah.
stuff. I learned that like way later on down the road.
Yeah. And I feel like it is one of those things, like one of the things I think is great about like Scott, like what you're doing, with the Comics 101 and stuff. It is one of those things where I think until recently, it was one of those things where you just kind of had to get your feet wet and just start doing it.
Yeah.
And then I still think to this day, you could watch like every video in the world, and if you don't start a comic, you're not going to learn.
Yeah, that's a big part of what I talk about. Yeah, I'll mention that on tomorrow's video too.
Yeah.
But the reason why I was kind of asking you what you taught and everything, Josh, was because up until just recently, when I did this course, I didn't really put myself in that category of somebody who taught comics.
Yeah.
Like I remember back, I used to watch. I don't know. Are you familiar, Rodney, with Art and Story, the Art and Story podcast from way back in the day? Did you ever listen to that or anything?
No, sir.
Okay, so anyway, it was one of our former co-hosts on the Artcasters, Kevin Cross. He kind of joined in late, but is also Jersey Droz and Mark Rudolph created this. They did this long-running podcast called Art and Story, just about creating comics. And I used to listen to that and dissect it. I mean, just the information was just so brilliant. I wish you could still access it, but it's gone.
I think they were hosted on the same host as BIPT, so they're both just, yeah.
But I used to watch that thing and I'm like, man, these guys know so much about comics and everything. And then the more you start doing it, the more, through whatever I started making an outline for this course and everything. And now that I've done it, I kind of feel like, yeah, I'm somebody who could probably actually teach comics now. I mean, I have, but like, if I did it like in an actual structured, situation or whatever. So now I kind of feel like I'm one of you guys. So I feel like I have something to say. But so Rodney, how did you get into sort of teaching comics? Now you say you teach kids and adults, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Cool.
Right now I'm working with high schoolers right now. I teach visual arts at High Point Christian Academy in High Point, North Carolina, and so I'm teaching a comic book design and illustration class there.
Awesome.
Nice.
And along with the Art 1 for the beginners, Art 2, Art 3, honors, and photography. And so I started teaching comics, doing like private lessons with folks. And so I would do that, and for a while I was doing that with the Arts Guild in my town, and so that was going real good. For a while I was teaching homeschoolers.
Oh, nice.
And so I started off with one group, and then it expanded into 2 groups, and then expanded into 3 groups, and so I was like hopping around, from town to town, like the Pied Piper, of comics, but it was really cool because the thing was that as I was learning and I was practicing, reading a lot of books, spent a lot of time at the library, and then when I started getting onto the internet and using YouTube and whatnot, YouTube was a big help, man. It was a big help because like when I decided that I was going to get serious about comics, I wanted that to be my niche. I remember my wife, she was asking me, she said, well, Rodney, you can do a whole lot of things, you know, with this art stuff, but which one of those would you do if you weren't getting paid? Which one would you do and you know would make you the happiest, right?
Yeah. Well, your wife is very smart because I keep telling people you have to niche down. I mean, you can do all that other stuff, but you got to, I mean, you kind of, and you know, this is debatable, but I still think you need to kind of focus on one thing. I mean, I think most successful people that do this, they kind of do, because we all want to do all this different stuff. You know, I'd love to go try my hand at sculpting, and I'll get around to that at some point, you know, when I have some time and everything. But, you know, I think it is really important. And a lot of people have a hard time with that. Like, you know, I love to do all this different stuff. So that's kind of how I arrived on what I do, like with the whole science thing, because I'm like, well, what are the things I like to draw? I like to draw robots. I like to draw zombies. I like to draw aliens. And then I had to think to myself, how do those three things connect? Those are my favorite things to draw. So how do they connect? Well, let's say there's this clandestine underground lair, and they're experimenting with alien DNA, or, you know, reverse engineering, you know, alien DNA or something like that. Or they could be, you know, that could be the epicenter of where a zombie outbreak comes from, with experimenting with whatever. Or they could be designing robots. So I could kind of fit all those three things in one thing, and then I sort of created this umbrella around the things I like to create. So, but anyway, I didn't mean to kind of segue away, but I just think that's definitely have the foresight to say, you know, focus on this one thing. Yeah. So.
Yeah, man. So, I mean, and what's crazy is that I had never really thought about that, man. But I think, you know, she saw me spinning my wheels, and she was like, let me help this man out. So, but what was wild, man, is that when I made the decision that was what I was going to focus on, I was going to put my attention to that, man, it was like stuff to start opening up, man. And you know, and then going to conventions, talking to the folks on the other side of the table and whatnot, and just really taking what they're telling me, you know, and just practicing it, you know. And I mean, really, you know, when the rubber meets the road, you know, I had to pick up the pencil, man. I had to pick up the pencils and the brushes and you know, and the ink pens and all that, and go on with it, man. But like, from doing that, I was really eager to want to share what I've learned with folks, you know, young or old, because the thing for me was I've kind of felt like, and I mean, okay, I'll just say it like this. I felt like when I was first really wanting to try my hand at learning how to make comics, I didn't know where to go. I didn't know who to turn to, and it seemed like it was like a mystery type of a thing, right? And I was just like, man, you know, I'm not moving to New York. I'm not going here or going there. I got to find a way to learn. I got to find a way to learn this stuff. You know, find somebody who can teach me. You know, and so it's like, I just kind of feel like now that I know, it's my duty to share that information, you know, so that it's not so foreign for folk. You know what I mean?
That's beautiful. Like a beautiful explanation of like the value of teaching too. And Scott, actually, I wanted to also, because I kind of pinned it, like when you said it in my head, I was like, okay, I gotta address that one too. You mentioned kind of at the top, like feeling like you just joined the ranks of like teaching or whatever. And when you were starting the videos, you were like, well, I don't know if I can even be a teacher, like, you know, going through that stuff. What's interesting, and it didn't dawn on me, you know, like when I was going to college, that what was happening was the majority of my college professors, if it was their first day on the job, they're walking in like, I don't know if I can teach. I don't know what I'm doing. Like, I just did my first syllabus. I don't even know if I have everything in it I need. Like, and then you start talking to people, and this, I'm sure Scott and Rodney, both of you guys have had this, but it's like, then when you talk to people and you're explaining stuff that's like, you're like, oh man, this is going to be boring because they probably already know this, right? And then they give you a response of like, oh, they didn't know. Like, and it's not that they're bad for not knowing. It's just that you've actually leveled up in your knowledge and are ready to teach.
Yeah.
You kind of can't know. Like, my point is, nobody just starts out as like, I'm a teacher. I think most teachers start out
You're right, man.
figuring it out as they go and going, okay, I think I might be able to do this. Let's try it out. Just like cartoonists. Like, cartoonists don't start comics if they've never done a comic going like, I've mastered comics. Like, you do it, and then you, by doing it, become a cartoonist. It's kind of a weird.
And you also learn when you're teaching. Like, I've learned so much just from this course. Like, before, you know, and it's almost like I said, I didn't know if I could actually teach it, but now I think I can, because I can just call back on all the stuff. Like, when I'm writing all the outlines, I mean, this stuff sits in the back of my head somewhere, and there's sometimes I have to go in and fill in the blanks. Like, okay, I kind of know this, but I want to make sure that I'm using the right terminology. So I'll do a little more research to make sure I'm getting the point across. And then I'm learning as I'm putting this stuff out there, and I'm becoming a better artist just by way of, you know, by teaching other people, I'm learning myself. But yeah, I mean, you can't, it's like I think almost with any job, unless it's just something that you've done before. But like, when I first started game design, I'd never designed any games. And that first day was like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can master these isometric drawings. And then, then it clicks. And then it's just from there, it's just like, oh man, I got this. So yeah, it's kind of a weird thing. But the other thing I wanted to mention was that, you know, when you were talking about, you know, some of the information that you're putting out there that you just kind of know like the back of your hand, and, you know, and there's been a lot of times where I'll just say something that I just think is, you know, it's kind of elementary or just kind of common sense, but then I'll get comments, people like, oh, that's such great advice. I never thought about it. And like, wow, man, don't hold back, because no matter what level you're, and even people, you know, you know, it's like you learn something new every day. Like, even though I've been on this earth for almost 50 years now, there's still things that I probably should have known, that I should have picked up along the way, but I didn't for whatever reason. Just I was in the right place, and a lot of other people may already know that, but I can still learn that, you know, things that may be commonplace for a lot of people. So, you know, never get too worried about, oh, that people just know this or whatever. So yeah, put that stuff out there, because, you know, no matter what level you are, there's still things you might miss, or little blanks and things you need to fill in. But
and I mean, the learning from teaching thing is a good point, because I think, Rodney, like you probably experience that a lot too, where it's like, I know every once in a while I'd get a student who was like a million times better than I ever was at their age, and you get to like push them to level up beyond, like, you know, I had a couple students that leveled up way beyond what I could do. And that's like the coolest thing, because then I'm learning from them. But, and you know, or like those beautiful moments when a student asks you something you have absolutely no idea. Like, I love those moments, because it's like, let's learn together, because I have no idea what the answer to that is. And I will tomorrow, because you asked, you know, that's awesome. Yeah.
So how long have you been teaching comics, and what was sort of that evolution, Rodney? I'll let you clear your throat.
Oh boy! Hold on, say that again.
I was asking, how long have you been teaching comics, and what was sort of that? Because we've talked how, you know, when I first started this, you know, I wasn't in the same position that I am, like, whatever. I think 5 months later, I've been doing this course. So how long have you been teaching, and sort of, you know, how has that evolved, or like, how did you come up your curriculum? Kind of how do you go about teaching, I guess, is sort of what I'm asking.
Man, well, I would say, like for teaching art, maybe 6 years.
Okay.
It's been 6 years teaching art, but this was my let me see. I would say for teaching comics, probably 3 years.
Okay.
3 years, and like you know, I believe in not reinventing the wheel. So like just about everything that I do, right? I've taken it from the books that I've read and that I've studied and that I've worked on. You know, the different things in there that I've learned. You know, and have practiced and internalized, and I use that. You know, and so when I create my syllabus and my curriculum and whatnot, I pile all that kind of stuff in there. But then one of the things I also do is I incorporate painting. You know, I incorporate a little bit of color theory. I incorporate sculpture in there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I feel like just to give the student an immersion into the characters that they create and stuff like that. You know, learning how to do scenes and your perspective and your foreground, middle ground, and background, and really, really making it interesting, making it pop, getting their imagination involved in there, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so like the approach that I try to take with my kids is, I tell them, I said, listen, I don't care where you think your skill level is right now. If you think that you're terrible, I don't even care about that. If you think that you're the best thing since sliced bread, I don't even care about that. But all I care about is, are you willing to put down what you think you know?
Yeah.
And allow me to pour into you. If you're willing to do that with and carry a good attitude about it, then I promise you that you are going to be 100 times better than you were the day that you walked in here.
Yeah, exactly.
You're gonna get better. Cause see, like, one thing I know is that, man, I want to be the best that I can be.
Yeah.
I want to strive for excellence in my craft and in my gift. And I have a understanding that it doesn't matter what your natural God-given talent is. It does not matter, because the thing is that God give every person a measure of talent, right? But that it's in seed form when you get it. So what you got to do is, you can't just take the seed and hold the seed and expect for it to produce for you. No, you got to put the seed in the ground, and you got to nurture it, and you got to water it, and you got to make sure it gets all the nutrients and everything that it needs. So that means that you got to take the natural talent, and you got to add applied skill to it. Exactly. And once you add the applied skill to it, and you working with it, and you're practicing, and let's say you're not catching it at first, you don't give up. You might step away from it, but come back to it and keep working it. And what happens is, you'll find that you're improving and you're getting better. And now you're not doing more missteps. You stepping on the right place. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And I've talked about this, in the series and everything, but, one of the things I always say is the best way to learn how to make comics is by making comics. Because if you just sit there and you're thinking about your comic, I mean, and it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't matter your skill level. And I think a lot of people, they've got this idea, they want to create their magnum opus or whatever it is right off the bat. Don't worry about any of that. Just a small comic. Start with a small comic.
That's right.
Do that comic.
Yeah.
It may not be great, but once you've got that done, then you move on to the next one. And as you go, you get better and you get better. And then you've got stuff to show for your effort and everything, and you'll improve. But if you just sit there and say, well, I just don't think my stuff's good enough to actually start the comic yet, if you've got this brilliant idea that you want to be like a huge series and everything, that's great. Put that aside for now. That's what I did, like with Young and the Dead. I mean, and I sort of went off the rails a little bit because that was supposed to be just a quick, like 8-pager. So as I started, and I purposely, the reason why I came up with that idea is I was trying to think of something very simple. I'm like, okay, kids fighting zombies. There's really nothing to it. It's a zombie story. There doesn't have to be much of a story. It could just be all action. But once I started getting into it, and then I started, there's something here. I'm kind of liking these characters, and it became more than just that. And then it ended up being an actual, comic, full size single issue comic, and then I went on from there. But yeah, I mean, if you got this brilliant idea, put that aside for now. Just pick something real simple and just get it done, and you're going to learn a little bit as you go. So yeah, I mean, that's brilliant advice, and to me, in retrospect, that's another one of those things that's just so elementary that it's to me, it's weird that I even have to explain that, but so many people need to hear that.
That's the truth, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like it's shocking to me how long for myself and like most of my friends who got into comics, how long the delay is to just finishing a book, and I think a lot of it comes from the reality of practice. Like, so the beauty of like doing it is like Rodney eloquently described, is like you lay lines down on a page, and no matter how good you think you are in your head, there's objective data in front of you showing the level of your artwork. And so, and now all kinds of different levels and styles of artwork exist, right? But it's really hard to say you're the next like Da Vinci if you can't draw. Like, and so like the beauty of like comics, like starting comics is, and why Scott, I think his advice to start small is good, is like once you start opening this can of worms. Like you could watch every video in the world on making comics and then be like, all right, I'm ready to make comics. And I guarantee you the second you start getting into it, like into the weeds of actually making it, it's going to open this Pandora's box of problems that you have to solve. Yeah. And I also will say, I think for a lot of people, especially people like all of us who grew up loving comics, it's like, be careful, because that Pandora's box is hard to close, because it's really addictive making it, because it's a challenge. Like I've met a lot of brilliant cartoonists, and I've never met a cartoonist who had it down pat. Like that's the beauty of comics, is like you never actually perfect it. Like it's always in flux. And the second you get better at anatomy, you're, starting to think more about composition. And then you get better at composition and you think about type. And you get better at type and you're thinking about, word balloons and like having enough space between those and the type. And then like, and the whole thing just continuously like, like to me, one of the most impressive things, Scott, about your series is the way you've managed to condense it. Even though it's a very extensive series, you're very thorough in the videos and I admire that, because and actually Rodney, I'd be kind of curious about that too.
Yeah, I did want to get into that.
Condense that into a class.
Yeah, that's my exact question. But first of all, I just wanted, before we get into that, I just want to say, and I say this all the time in my series, is that I'm just putting out the basics, because each one is like 30 minutes at the most, for the most part. So I just put out the basics and I go quick. So, I mean, you might have to rewind, I could go over something, but that's just the way it is, because I just want to put that information out there. But you got to do your homework after that. If you want to know more about a topic, that stuff's out there, but at least you have a blueprint, or you know where to go. So yeah, that's the same question I was going to ask you, what Josh just did, is how do you create. There's so many things involved in creating a comic. I mean, I did 22 weeks each on a different aspect of making comics. How do you condense that into a course so you can teach kids this stuff?
Man, look, man. I'm asking myself the same question, right? but I'm gonna tell you, man. Like you know, this year was the first year of me doing it, right?
Uh-huh.
And so what ended up happening was when I first started, I had in my mind, and I had wrote out in my syllabus that, you know, we were going to go and we were going to start with writing and whatnot, and you know, creating the characters on paper and then doing the artwork. Well, when I went in there and started with the kiddos, man, they was not receiving that, you know.
Yeah.
And so after that first day, I did not waste time. I said, okay. I said, all right. I prayed about it. Lord was like, I told you, get them kids drawing first. I said, okay, that's what I'm gonna do. So then the next day when they came in, I was like, okay, you guys, we're gonna start working on some basic anatomy. So I said, okay, we'll start with the basic anatomy. I'll teach them how to put a figure together, male or female. I'll teach them how you can use shapes to make whatever you want, and then have them practice that. Have them getting partners and then do a draw like a picture of the person, not detailed, just put the body together. So look at the partner, draw them out, you know, and then switch and do the same thing. So, you know, I was trying to get them to think the way that I had to learn how to think in order to put people together, put figures together, put things together quickly, you know, and so, you know, I started doing that stuff, man, and you know, getting into perspective. I only had time to do 1 point and 2 point, and I know they some of them liked it and some of them did not like it.
A lot of people don't like it.
Everybody hates perspective until they start drawing a comic page where they need it, and then they're like, "Crap! I should have paid attention to perspective."
Yeah, man. You know, it's like, you know, I'm telling them, because you know, a lot of them, right? They a lot of those kids in there really like comics, right? But you know, it's like they had no idea of the work that's involved.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm telling them, I'm saying, I'm like, look, one thing that you need to know is that you got to work, man. This is work. You got to work it. But the thing is the more you practice this. And I kept saying this to the kids, listen, the more you practice, you got to practice at home. You got to do it. If you don't do it, when you come in here and I give you an assignment, or you know, I tell you, hey, listen, I want y'all to do this today. I want you to do this. I want you to do that. Right? I'm going to be able to look at your work and absolutely tell whether or not you've been practicing. Yeah. You know, they got a name for me. The nickname is Eagle Eye Bennett, because I'll look at it. I tell them, I say, okay. I said, all right, now when Mr. Bennett looks at it, he's going to be real nice and say, you know, nice platitudes. But when Eagle Eye Bennett looks at it, he's looking at it.
So do they know?
He's like, yeah.
Do they know what Bennett they're going to get, or do you just spring that on them?
Nah, I tell them. I tell them. I say, okay. I says, all right. Come on up here. I call them up to my table, and I say, okay. Let's take a look. Mr. Bennett wants to take a look, and I look at it, and I'm like, okay. I'm like, I tell him what's working. Right? And I say, okay, now Eagle Eye's getting ready to look at it. All right.
I like that approach a lot.
That is a good approach. I made the worst error, like my first semester teaching, like, so I taught at like Laguna College of Art and Design. And my first semester there, I was like, all right, it's college. And I was like straight out of just, like 10, 15 years of freelancing. So I was used to just like, this is what you change. This is what's wrong. The arms off. Like, just, honest, like type of feedback I'd get from Scott, or Scott would get from me if he was like, hey, how can I fix this? It's like, well, the arm's off. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we were just kind of pretty direct. And don't get me wrong, it's not like we're jerks. It's just we want to make our art better. So it's like, hey, what can I fix on this? Well, the color theory is now. So I came in with that attitude, and I felt so bad. It was my first week, and I think I just crushed those kids because I had forgotten how fragile, like, even I was at that age, even as a young adult. It's like when you're doing art, you kind of need to be fed a little bit. So I think that the approach you're talking about is brilliant, because I after that week, I was like, I still am going to be cold and honest in critiques because people need it to get better at art. But I just started couching my critique with every time I'd start my critique, I'd start it by going, most of you guys are probably excellent artists, and like, I'm sure that, your friends, your family, I'm sure people are blown away by your art. That's why you're here. That's why you're in art school. Right. Mm-hmm. And, but like, I'm here to try to get you to a level where it's beyond your friends and family. It's beyond small circles, to where an art director who's never met you, doesn't know you from Adam, is going to look at your work, right, and be able to just acknowledge it over all the competition that's out there of professionals, all the artists you admire who are submitting the same art directors, right? So I'm going to be honest and cold. So I'd have to hedge with that, like that kind of just feeding in a little bit to those students before you get into the harsh critique. Like, it's actually it's weird, but it does make a difference, because and it made a difference with even my evaluations. Like, the students evaluated me better just from having that little hedge, because sometimes you need to give a little honey to those students, because if you just come in and go, that arm's off, this is off, you could be that guy who like ruins a kid, and it's like that always bums me out, the idea of even being that person, like the jerk at the convention who's like, don't come back, kid, you'll never work for Marvel. I never want to be that guy.
That's why I like Rodney's approach, because I have always done like that sort of sandwich technique where positive, and then you get into the critical stuff, and then leave with positive. But that's still the same person. Whereas Rodney's kind of separating himself into two people.
Smart, yeah.
Mr. Bennett, so I'm going to say the nice things. So, and then, Eagle Eye Bennett comes along.
That is brilliant.
He says some of the harsh truths, but when they get mad, they can't get mad at both. They can only get mad at one. So I love that. That
is brilliant. I might borrow that at my day job. I might actually borrow that. I'll be like, all right, I'm nice art director today, and I'm mean art director. Are you ready for it? Okay, cool.
So I feel like we may have cut you off a little bit, because I know you have more to talk about on that, Rodney. So sorry about that.
Yeah.
Oh man, but nah, man. But it's like, I feel like it's important for me to, I don't want to break a kid. You know what I'm saying? But part of my job is to help them. Because like one of the things that I tell the kids is, and I'm very for real about this when I tell them, I said, listen, man, if you walking around town and you're saying that Mr. Bennett is your instructor, then your work ought to show that you spent time with me. And when I tell them that I'm for real, y'all, I tell them like serious. I'm like, listen, I got a name. My name is important. Maybe only 3 people know it, but it's still important. It's still important. And I'm like, if if somebody, I think about it like kung fu movies, right? Kung fu movies, you got the master, right? So and then you got the pupil, right? So if the student is going around town telling folks from other kung fu schools that, hey, this is my master, he's my teacher, and this, that, and the third. But then if you get in a fight, you get whipped all the time. What does that? What's that say about your master? You're giving your master a bad name. So I tell my students, I said, look, man, you are, the same way that regardless of where my skill level is, I'm willing to learn. I want to get better. I want my skill set to grow and grow and grow. Anytime somebody wants to pay me to do something, I don't ever want to tell them no. I want to tell them, yeah, I can do that. And that's just real talk. And so when I'm talking to the kids, I'm telling them, say, listen, man, this is the attitude that you've got to adopt. You got to get this. You got to get that. So I'll be able to look and see whether or not you're doing what I'm telling you to do. And it's been working.
That's awesome.
It's been working, for the most part. It's been working. So
this is an interesting thing. I don't know if a lot of people who haven't taught know this, and I think once you teach, you do. But it's it is kind of amazing how sometimes it's very transparent just through the art, not just time and effort, and it's across all skill levels. So it's you'll have a really talented student who kind of turns in something, and it's just not quite there's just a feeling about it. And one thing I always caught myself saying when I was teaching college, when I was doing critiques, and this is I would just be I don't think you were into this. I can just tell you were bored, doing this. No. And that's one of the most interesting things about art is I think you said this at the top too. It's if you're not kind of pouring yourself into it, it just shows. It could even technically be good, but if there's no heart in the execution of it, it's weird, but it's people don't get heart out of it. So right. Rodney was describing with your comics and stuff, it's because you have this, I think for your own work, right? Because you have that attitude with your own work, your own ethic. It's I think that's something that can translate really well to students. But I always found it surprising when students would almost look they look at you well, how did you, are you Sherlock Holmes? How did you figure that out? And you're it's not that, it's not that hard to figure out. But it is, I don't know. I do think back to when I was a student and I wouldn't sometimes I'd turn an assignment and be I didn't spend a lot of time on it. Nobody will notice. And then the teacher, catches it and you're so it's just funny being on the other end where you're oh, it's not that hard to tell from a teaching standpoint, just especially when your stuff with art, it's if you kind of slack. So that's cool. So I like the master apprentice analogy you brought up too. That's a really good one.
Keenan, question. Okay. Go ahead, Josh. I was gonna.
Oh, okay. So Keenan was asking. She was saying, with my understanding of you being an art teacher and having to teach comics, is there a how-to book you'd recommend? I'm sure there's a couple, but any particular ones you'd recommend off the top?
Off the top of my.
No, questions for you. I just want to see if it matches up with what I'm thinking. But go ahead.
Man, you know what? I've got a couple of faves here. One of them is How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way.
That's mine.
Yeah, that would have been my first one.
For beginners, I mean, it's condensed. It's short. It's great. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It stands the test of time. But yeah, go ahead.
It does, man. And I've got y'all can't see this, but I've got a whole bunch of books over here, man. And but well, like for somebody who's they wanna get involved in creating comics, I would most definitely recommend that. Because I think it's in bite-sized pieces. It's very readable.
Mm-hmm.
It's very readable. There are some books out here that have good information, but for me, some of them I'm like, man, that's a whole bunch of reading.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know what I mean, and then just like the way that the type is set up, it's like looking at a newspaper, and I'm like, I would have to really sit down and like really, peel my eyes back to get the information. but that's the one. But then also, there's a lot of great books out here for perspective and building figures and lighting and inking and all that kind of stuff, man. But that's the main one. That's the main. I keep looking over here because I'm trying to see if there is one that like really speaks to me that I want to pull out.
While you're looking at that, Josh and I were just talking about before the show about David Chelsea's perspective books. Are you familiar with those? So we've had David on the show, and I just got one of his newer books, but it's really advanced stuff. But his first book,
Perspective 2 is like my brain kind of explodes when I try to.
Perspective, I think it's just Perspective for Comic Book Artists by David Chelsea, and it's done in kind of that sort of Scott McCloud format where it's told the information is presented as a comic, and I mean that was. Even somebody who's done a lot of perspective, a lot of the stuff really clicked because just the way it's, like you said, I have trouble reading stuff that's like just a newspaper, like you said. I mean, it's like, so it's done as a comic and that's a great book. So
it's like a visually told story to talk about visual storytelling. So I think that's I think that's the ultimate way to do it. And actually it's weird, but there's a lot of how-to books and there are a few that like nail that, like the balance of like visually telling how to, because you got to realize like artists, I love reading, but when I'm reading, I'm in a totally different mindset. Like when I'm reading type than when I'm reading like a comic, because a comic kind of activates like the visual. And so to me, like, I feel like if you got to use visuals if you're teaching visual,
Yeah, man. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So did you find anything back there?
Well, let's see. Now this one right here, The Insider's Guide to Creating Comics and Graphic Novels by Andy Schmidt.
Can you hold it up so I can see? Okay, all right. Ooh. Yeah, the Impact imprint had a lot of books. I don't know that they're still in business, but I've got a few of those Impact books.
Nice.
Those
are good series.
I love it.
That was helpful. That was very helpful for me. Let's see. I had something else. Oh, here's another one, right?
Oh, of course. I have to admit I don't have that. I've read it, but I don't have it. I have to get a copy of that. That was like
this.
Yeah, I think we talked about when I was in school, we had the comics class. That and How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way were always checked out because it was, they were teaching comics, but they only had so many not comic books, but comic books on comics in the library. So those were always checked out. Yeah. I remember I checked out How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way, and I Xeroxed the whole thing. And that was my copy for the longest time before I bought one. But I probably should have done the same with the Will Eisner book.
So, like, I know this isn't a book, but it's like, to me, and I know Scott's already mentioned this on his Making Comics 101, but to me, one of the most helpful, like talking about just visual explanations of comics is the 22 Panels That Always Work by Wally Wood. It's you can find it online anywhere, but it's like a cheat sheet of different ways to do, and it's mostly like just a visual solution to avoiding talking heads. And so like, how do you show like conversation sequences without it just being a floating head? And if you just look at the 22 panels, it's like, it just visually, you barely even have to look at the notes. It just visually gives you cues, like frame it this way. Like,
yeah,
you know,
or you can also, I did a quick tip episode on 22 panels. Well, it was 22 panels, and I went through each one and kind of explained it. So that's up there too.
Yeah, so go check
That's
that.
probably in the week I was doing paneling, I suppose, I imagine. But yeah, so that's there too. But yeah, that's great stuff.
Well, when
I just wrote that down.
photocopies. Sorry, go ahead, Rod.
I said I just wrote that down, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you haven't seen it, that's like required. I would say required reading, but it's just it's basically like a poster. All you have to do is Google it, and about 100 different images of it'll pop up, probably more.
Yeah. And I discovered that one by meeting another cartoonist, like back in art school, who just like, and we were at a school that wasn't like very pro comics at the time, you know? And so it's like the cartoonists really kind of stuck together because it's like, they hate what we do. Like, but what was cool was like, it was like a Xerox thing that just cartoonists would kind of pass among themselves. So it's cool that we're in a day and age where you can just Google it now. But
yeah, I remember that kind of stuff back in the day, because it was also the same with I remember like videotapes and things like that. There was, I had we're getting a little off topic, but I had a friend who was, he did like a lot of voiceover, and he did a voiceover on this thing. I saw your shirt, Rodney, but it was just, have you seen that Star Wars thing, Troops? It's like a real old, it was kind of like Cops, but it was the Stormtroopers. So they did this parody of Cops, but with Stormtroopers. And this back before the internet, and he had a copy of it. And it was just something that somebody just did for fun or something like that. He did one of the voices, so he gave me this. And it was like no one had seen it. So anytime you got to see this, you got to put this on. I put that in there. But now anyone can see it. All you have to do is like do a YouTube search. But I remember that was so, when you get those things that no one else has, it's like, oh man, and then you got to share it. And it just gets passed around. And that's like the 22 panels. It's been Xeroxed over and Xeroxed over, so the copy is so bad you can hardly read it. But yeah, man, those were, I want to say they're the good old days, but it's much better now that you can just Google that stuff. But it was fun. It was a bit of a challenge, and in some ways I kind of missed that challenge.
I will say, like, back when we didn't even have like a good video section. So I remember, like, I think it was when I was in junior high, obtaining a taped copy from another tape, like a VHS of Akira, and it just blowing my mind because I hadn't heard of anything like that before then. And I will say, like, no matter how many things I discover, no animation is going to have that kind of impact because of the rarity of it. Just the fact that, like, what is this thing? I've never seen it, and now I have this copy that no one has. And then you get to be the person who goes, you got to see this. Like, that's a great, but that can tie back into the comics thing, because that's kind of what do you find that might be one of the valuable things is, like, you've acquired this knowledge, right? So it's like, and by being able to teach, you get the joy of being able to share, like, this hard to obtain information, right? Is that kind of like what I guess my point would be, like, what's kind of the value for you in teaching? Like, I think a lot of, I don't know. Does that make sense?
No, it makes plenty sense, man. It makes plenty sense. It's I'm in total agreement. Man. I love, the opportunity and the ability to be able to take what I've learned, what's taken me, years to be able to accumulate, and then be able to condense it and break it down and then feed it to my students in chewable bite-sized pieces that they can, that they can work with, right? And it makes me feel good, because, I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, man, here I am. I feel like I'm paying it forward because I had to go through, I had to do a whole lot of extra searching and scraping and clawing to to get this get this knowledge. So it's like I'm now been given the opportunity to be able to make it easily accessible. And then I met my man Brian Stillfreeze, right? Awesome dude. That dude is an awesome dude. Okay. He's a teacher, man. He is a teacher, fantastic artist, and so I met him at Heroes, right? And every time I would go by where he was at, he was always teaching. He was always teaching. Folks would come up with their portfolios and whatnot, and they would let him look at it, and he'd be standing over there like a general, and he'll tell them what's going on with it, and what strengths they have, what they need to work on and whatnot. And so I would go over there and talk to him and whatnot, and when he found out that I was teaching, every time he would see me, he would be like, man, he'd be listen, what are you teaching? What are you teaching the kids? What are you working on with them? And he would always encourage me, look, don't just hold your gift. Don't hoard your gift, but you need to share it. You need to share it. You need to teach others so that this thing can always continue onward. The storytelling process can always continue forward, and I think it's important, man. People have things that, that they want to say, messages they want to get across, stories in their heart. And, man, comics, man, that's the way to go because, it's like you can tell whatever type of story you want. And even if you can't, even if you really, really, really feel like you can't draw it, you can get somebody to draw it. But it's just a matter of building the confidence up to get that thing out of your brain, get it out of your head. Allow it to manifest itself on some paper or on your tablet, Cintiq, or your device, or whatever you're using, and just get it out into the universe. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, man, was I rambling?
No, it was good.
I made sense. Did I make sense?
Yeah, what I was going to say was that you definitely need to get back. And to me, I don't know when I'm gone from this world if anyone will care about my art, but I know one thing. I know when I do these videos, somebody's going to take something that I said or whatever. Somebody's going to learn something, and whether I become, whether my artwork becomes famous or whatever, there's going to be, out of all the other people that I've touched and that I've reached through teaching, one of those people is going to do something amazing. And just to know that, I've had some sort of small part in that. I think Tupac had a quote, something similar to that he may not achieve this or that, but he will reach the person that does. I'm paraphrasing. I forgot that. I'll have to look up that quote, but that's the way I think about it. Cause I don't, like I said, I don't know if my artwork is gonna stand the test of time, but I know somebody's gonna learn something and somebody's gonna do great things with it. So
yeah,
that's right.
Yeah. So Kevin and I did that podcast years ago, and it's like, I honestly, it had been years since that had happened. And so I was like, I almost had forgotten about it. And I was at a portfolio review as an art director, and I'm meeting with other art directors in the area. And I met an art director who I talked to for about 30 minutes. And then out of nowhere, they were like, I know your voice because I used to listen to BIPT. and they told me that's why they got into art. And I'm like, so that's one person. That's not a common occurrence, but it's like with distance, I think, like for instance, the comics, like making comics 101, I guarantee you, Scott, like you're already getting people who are responding, who are moved by it. But I guarantee you in like 5 years, you're going to have some kid who saw that, who's like, you're the guy.
That's going to be amazing.
Yeah, you could be the how to, drawing comics the Marvel way. You could be that for a different generation. And I think that's really cool. And
absolutely.
And tacking on to what you said too, Rodney, about storytelling and comics, like the great thing about comics and the addictive thing about comics is, like, if you set out to film like a feature movie, like a feature film, it requires actors, it requires like lighting and all sorts of components, and usually it's a group project, even if it's an indie film. If you set out to write a book, it's like you're giving data but not a lot of visuals, so it's all imagination. But the beauty of like comics is this one unique visual medium where you don't need a crew to do it. You can literally do everything. You can do the costuming, the lighting, the script, the casting. Like you are the cast. You're everything, and you don't have to be everything. You can work with a team or a crew on it, but the beauty of comics that's really unique to me about it is it is one of the few mediums where you can do long form storytelling and have full control over everything. So that's a beautiful way to get your message out, It
is. It really is, man. And like, on that note, I was talking to a friend of mine, and I said, man, it was like I just had like this light bulb go off in my head when I was working on my second book, right? And light bulb went off, and I want to say that was when I really realized, how awesome it is to create your own product, create your own book, your own story. Because like, it was like it started clicking that, man, you can do what you want to do. You do what you want to do. You can blend whatever you want to blend. You can mix whatever you want to mix. You can bake whatever you want to bake, and you can take whatever you want to take.
I love it.
Do it. So I was just like, man, I said, whoa, because sometimes you feel like you're pigeonholed into doing something the way that other people have done it, right? But the thing is that there's a such thing as not reinventing the wheel, but there's another thing, as far as being free to be creative and follow your bliss and do what makes you happy as far as your storytelling and stuff like that is concerned. And so that's one of the things that I really enjoy about making comics, man.
Yeah.
Definitely. Is that so? We're at like about the hour and a half mark. So, is there anything else that you wanted to mention before you start wrapping things up? Anything that we didn't touch on? I mean, obviously, we'll go around. We'll promote our stuff one more time before we get out of here. But as far as the topic of teaching and everything like that, teaching comics, is there anything that you wanted to mention that we didn't touch on yet?
No, I think you touched on all of that. I just want to say that I think that the teaching of this craft, man, of comic creating, I think it's so valuable. It's really important, and it's something that needs to continue to happen, man, because for so long it's been kind of like a mystery, it's like a secret club, and if you didn't know, professionals or you weren't in a certain geographic area, then you was just out of luck.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? But it's like, by the grace of God, we got folks who are sharing this information. Scott, you one of them, sharing this information on YouTube and whatnot, and Josh, you sharing this information at the schoolhouse.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sharing this information at the schoolhouse, man. This is it's a good thing, because I feel like it opens up avenues for folks, man, that may not feel like they're able to express themselves.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's important.
Yeah, there's like no excuses right now. I mean, it was harder back then because you had to find, like you said, you have to find a professional that's willing to give you a little bit of that inside information. And we talk about how, we don't believe in this whole idea of trade secrets. Everyone should, this stuff should be available to anyone that wants to learn it, because it's not easy to learn. So if anyone that's afraid that, this person's going to take my information and go run with it and they're going to be better than me and if they do that, more power to them, but it's going to take a lot of work. Not everyone's going to be able to do that, because not everyone's going to put in the effort and the time that it takes. But if you want to, it is available to you. All you have to do is, it's at your fingertips, but you have to want it, and you have to put in the time. It's not going to happen right away. You've got to put in that effort. So that's why I'm never worried about putting that stuff out there, because I know if anyone does take that information and they apply everything that they need to apply and they work at it, then they deserve to take work away from me. Not that that's not even a concern, but because there's enough work for everyone if you know where to look for it and everything. But yeah, it's that
that's right
out there. So, all right, awesome. So let's go back around. So Josh, what do you got going on?
All right. So yeah, you can check out my illustration work at joshuakemble.com. If you want a sneak peek at my autobiographical graphic novel that's currently kind of being proposed to different publishers, you can check out a little preview at quarterlystories.com. And other than that, I should just stay tuned. There will probably also be music on there, which is a strange thing for comics, but I think rock and roll and comics go hand in hand. I forget who said it, but it's like most cartoonists I know are either into hip hop or punk rock. It's just one or the other. Like I don't meet a lot of
comics. Doesn't matter what kind of music. Comics are. It's not just superheroes. You could have, if you're into whatever classical music, you have classical. Have
That's
that
right.
Comics. It doesn't matter what you're into. You can do a comic on anything. That's what's so cool about it. Yeah. Anything else, Josh?
That'll do it.
All right. Okay, Rodney, where can people check you out? And I'll give a little hint. It's right down there, but you can go ahead and repeat that. And then, just anything else you want to promote or anything like that.
Oh, yeah. You guys can catch me at legendoftheblackstar.com, and that's star with 2 R's. If you put one, I don't know what you're going to get. Okay? But yeah, you can catch me there. I'm also on Instagram, Instagram.com, legend_of_the_black_star.
Awesome.
And also on Facebook, facebook.com, art by Rodney Bennett.
Love it.
Yeah, definitely check out Rodney's stuff. And also, I just want to thank Rodney for staying up late, because he's on the East Coast. So I know. I always feel guilty anytime I find something from the East Coast on, because I know it's like so late. So hopefully, he said he was going to get a nap. So hopefully, he got his nap. All right. So as far as me, you can find me at circworks.com, also Circworks on YouTube. And if you want to check that final episode will premiere tomorrow. Well, it won't. When I say premiere, there's a thing on YouTube where there's an official thing called a premiere. It won't be one of those, but it will be available on YouTube tomorrow. So yeah, that'll be the last episode, and then we'll get into doing some other stuff. I'm not exactly sure what yet, but I will be putting the call out to anyone just because I want to know what other people want to see on the channel. But we'll get into that next week. But yeah, so that's what I got going on right now. Also, I wanted to thank the chat. They're all, you guys are probably staying up late too, checking this out. So we do appreciate everyone in the chat. Great conversations. But yeah, so that's going to do it for another episode of the Artcasters. I guess we'll see you guys. We'll see you guys next. Oh wait, I almost forgot. I forgot the reason why I go last because I gotta.
Oh yeah. So Scott, just before we go, please explain to people. The show bounces from my channel, your channel. It's sometimes it's on a different day, even though it's usually on Thursday nights. How do people keep track of this crazy thing?
You think after 233 episodes, I would have that down to a science, but evidently not. So yeah. If you want to know where we're going to be broadcasting at, because we do switch back and forth from Josh's channel to mine. We have different guests on. It could be on a different time, although we've been pretty steady for a while. We've been Thursdays around 9 o'clock Pacific, but that could change. And if it does change, you want to know about it. And the way to do that is to just join our mailing list, and we don't spam you or anything like that. Usually we just send out an email about 30 minutes ahead of time, and you'll know who the guest is going to be, you'll know who the topic's going to be, and you'll know when we're going to go live. And there's a link to that in the description. So definitely check that out if you haven't already, because YouTube doesn't always notify people. So if you want to be notified for sure, then just join that mailing list. And now that is the end of the show, and we'll see you guys next week. Later, everyone.